sitting, because then you'll feel like I was pointing them out, and I have no interest in pointing them out, even though I was sitting right over here. It's good to gather and worship the Lord, isn't it? And it's spring break, and here we are at church. This is amazing. I think we put a big toothy grin on God's face today by showing up. So we've been in a series on the story of Joseph, and one of my biggest fans, which I have no idea really, I don't remember who you are, but you brought me a picture, and I wanted you to see it because you said, I found a likeness between you and VeggieTales story of Joseph. So how many of you are familiar with this? You know, because you really need to get, because they're going to outlaw VeggieTales books. They are. But I'll tell you, can you believe it? Hey, why did you move the pictures so fast? I was going to I don't see any connection whatsoever. But anyway, I'm really glad you guys found it humorous, because you need to have something to lighten your load after what we're going to look at today, okay? All right. So I love to be picked on, which is why I love to pick on you. Do you feel the love? Yeah. Well, listen, next Sunday we bring in this story for a landing, and we wrap up our series. And really, honestly, if you've ever, read a good book, and when you came to the end of it, it was sad that I just love this so much. I wish they still had 2 more chapters or a few more chapters, and that's kind of the way I feel very much about this story of Joseph. Even though we have, other epilogues of what happens out of this story that's scattered throughout the scriptures. Now, after this next week, when we finish this, then of course we have Easter Sunday, and I know that you've been inviting your friends, what 1 or 2 of them you have, to come and be here. And we are making it very special on Easter. We have 3 services. And so you're going to need to grab the invite cards on your way out. They're on the offering boxes. They're on the tables out in the lobby, because those are time changes. So we will have first hour is at 8:30 instead of 9. And second hour is at 10 o'clock, and third hour is at 11:30. Each of those are 1 hour services. Those are 1 hour, which is going to be a real test for Jason. He doesn't think that's funny. Anyway, 1 hour. Here we worship, we celebrate the resurrection of our Messiah, and then we scram so that the next group can get in, and then after that the next group can get in. And so I hope that you'll maximize on the opportunity to invite people, because this is a great time of year to do that, and people are more receptive. You know why? Because of the times we're living in. And I'll be talking about things very pertinent on that particular Sunday. I've had now almost 4 months to gather the greatest amount of sermon material from my congregation for Easter Sunday. It's going to be a delight. So anyway, you don't want to miss that one. You don't want to miss that one. But following on the other side of that, we're going to continue with this whole idea of stories as we get into the parables that Jesus told. We're going to do 8 weeks on the stories that Jesus told. So got some great days coming up. For this morning, we're over in chapter 46. Now, last week we came to the part in the story where Joseph identified himself not only as the prime minister, but as the brother who was sold in slavery by his brothers that are standing in front of him. And he charged his brothers to go home now after we've had this wonderful time of reunion and melting our hearts together. Go home and get Dad, and bring him and all the rest of the family, bring them down here so that they can not succumb to the famine, and let's celebrate and let's have some time together. And so that's what happened. So I want to begin today by picking up the last few verses of chapter 45 that I think will really help us with what I really want to underscore this morning. So if you've got your Bibles, I want you to see chapter 45, verse 25. And so they went on their way. They left Joseph, and they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, Joseph is still alive. In fact, he's ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He was stunned. He didn't believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived, and Israel said, I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go, and I will see him before I die. Pretty interesting. What an amazing passage. I mean, can you imagine the emotional gamut that is happening in that room when they drop this on their father, and the impact that it's having on all who are involved? Can you imagine that? Now, Jacob's 130 years old at this point, and he's made his way back into the story, and he is so taken by what's happened. And I want you to see in this story that both Joseph and Jacob are living their lives really centered on God. All the components of their lives, everything that they did, revolved around God's plans, God's purposes, God's ways. And I want you to see that in this message this morning. So many of us look at Joseph's life and we think, man, I wish I could live a life like him. I mean, not with trials and hardships. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ability to go through difficult times, challenging times, bad times, and be fully aware that God is with me. Be fully aware that, the Lord is going to be my helper, that the Lord is going to see this thing through. And I think that's so important. I want to live the way that Joseph lived when he found himself in hardship. I want to bring glory to God and be used by God. And so herein lies the problem. We want the life of Joseph while we end up living a life much like his brothers. Because we want the blessings, we want the benefits of living close to the Lord while we're holding on many times to our self-centeredness, sometimes our own sinfulness, that arena where we keep putting ourselves in the seat of priority, and we're unwilling to give an inch to God in certain areas of our life. In fact, we'll even hang up no trespassing signs. I want you in my life, but not really. But yes, I do. No, I really do. I just don't want you in this area of my life. I want enough of you that I feel comfortable, but not enough of you that you squeeze my comfort zone. I want enough of you that I get into heaven, but not enough of you that you convict me all the time. I really want you, but not really, but kind of. We're messed up. This is amazing. So what I see in Jacob and Joseph are lives that they lived to the glory of God. They had God right in the middle, right in the center. And so that causes me to ask you a question. And why does it cause me to ask you a question? Because I wrote it on my paper. Ask them this question. Where is God in your life? Where is he at in your dreams, in your plans, in your decisions, in your relationships, in your finances, in the way that you use your time? Where is God at? Because one of the things I think that we have to come to terms with is that a big portion of this chapter we're about to look at is the fact that God wants to be the center of our life. He really wants to be that center of my life. And I tend to treat God, instead of being the center and everything revolves around him, I tend to either put myself there and slot God in as one of those other aspects of my life. And then I work him like a combination lock. When I need him, I take him to the top, Sometimes I run him past a little bit, bring him back around. I've got him slotted in, but he's just a part. He's not the center. Do you get this? And this is so important because we actually end up having to fight in order to put God in the center of our life. Because our natural tendency is to be in full control. Be me-centered, self-centered. And you know what? That gets real old real fast. We see it in our kids. Now, you know, this is the fourth time I've had to tell you this. Do you want me to tell you again? Because the next time I'm going to tell you in a different way. Because it's this natural tendency of our kids not to obey, but to disobey. True? Is that true? We have to correct our kids. We don't have to teach them to be disobedient. They learn that, you know, from their neighbor kids, you know. But the Bible calls this carnal. Carnal. That word carnal means against or opposed to the spiritual. Paul even refers to this as the old self or the old man. So he says, you know, put the old man to death. So we kill him, we put him in a box, but he keeps trying to kick his way back out. And it's a battle. So if we're going to really live God-centered lives, it's going to involve seeking his direction at the crossroads of our lives. And I want you to see this morning in what we're going to look at. So if we're really going to live God-centered lives, it means that we're going to have to get serious about seeking his direction at the crossroads, the decision-making points of our lives. Now, you don't have to be alive very long to discover that life is full of forks in the road and crossroads. These are moments when we have to decide, you know, am I going to go right or left? I'm going to choose right or wrong. I'm going to obey or I'm going to disobey. We have those things happen. And we see this happen all the time. Most of the time, it's fairly small issues like, hey, what should we have for lunch today? Where should we go for lunch today? You know, should we go to church today? Or should we risk coming down with leprosy? Ooh, that's a big one. Now, for those of you streaming, take a pass. You know, just take a pass. We're good with you streaming today. But we have these small things that as we horse around trying to make decisions, it's probably not going to impact the trajectory of our life. But I'll tell you, when we start to get to the big decisions, when we start to get to those decisions that have direct impact on relationship with God, relationship with other people, the direction that we're going to go with who we fall in love with, who we're going to marry, where we're going to live, what we're going to do, what those big decisions are, those are the things that can really impact the direction of the future of our life. And the decision that we see Jacob facing is not small. It's a very, very heavy decision, and yet it's a great decision because as we've just finished reading here, and by the time we pick him up here at verse 1 of chapter 46, I mean, this guy's having something that he dreamed about for the last 20 years of his life, not expecting it would ever come to pass, but he at least wondered and hoped and wished it would, and that was that this son that has been killed and dead and gone would actually be like a bad nightmare that we woke up from, and it was all a dream, and it never really happened, and there he is. And now his sons are standing in front of him, telling him that the son that he thought was dead is actually alive. Now, if any of you have ever lost a loved one where you just longed for and wished in your own heart that it was just a bad dream and I could just wake up and it would be just great again, that person is actually alive, this is Jacob. This is real. For over 20 years, he's assumed that Joseph is dead, and the evidence has been very credible. I mean, he had a number of witnesses who told him, yeah, we saw the coat of many colors. We saw it was torn. It was bloodied. Animal must have killed him. Plus, you know, no one's seen Joseph for 20 years, and within the first year, you know, the lingering doubts because there was no more evidence that would contradict what he was told, he just figures, you know what, this is reality. He's really dead. I'll never see him again this side of heaven. Well, after a couple of visits in Egypt, these brothers come back with a different story. I mean, you want to talk about being a fly on the wall. I read this section, I wish, oh man, I'd love to have been a fly on the wall of that tent. I love to hear, hey dad, listen, you got some good news, got some bad news. Got some good news, got some bad news. You know the good news, bad news kind of humor? Starts here in the Bible. Ha, ha, ha. Hey, Roger, I got some good news and some bad news. Well, tell me the good news. The airbags worked perfect in your car. Oh, yeah. Guy goes to the doctor, he says, I got some good news, some bad news. What's the good news? Well, you're going to live another 48 hours. What's the bad news? I should have told you Tuesday. So, they come in and they've had to rehearse this story, Which one of us is going to drop the bomb on Dad? Which one of us is going to, unleash the Kraken on him and drop this? We'll probably give the poor guy a heart attack. So we need to do it very easy. Let's just kind of ease into it, So, they just say, hey, Dad, we just had such a great trip. We were talking on the way home, and, we were just talking about, I wonder how you're doing and how things have been while we've been in Egypt, and, Joseph's alive. And we just had the most great trip, and it was such a wonderful, the scenery this time of year, and, he's actually the prime minister. And, it was just such a great trip, Dad. And we lied to you. We told you he was dead. It was just such a dumb joke. Reuben's the one who came up with the dumb thing, He's blamed it on Judah the whole time, but it was really Reuben, And did you see what it said? It said that he didn't believe them. If you chase the word down, it really says that he was numb. He was dumbfounded. You could have knocked him over with a feather. Do you get this? Did my ears just hear what I think I heard? Is this a sick joke? What is going on? Now, you know what? We don't know what the story was like because Moses, as he writes the book of Genesis, he doesn't include us in what happened other than the fact that he tells us that Jacob's heart was numb. I mean, if you've ever been told something that just was beyond belief, I mean, why would he believe them? Look what happened the last time he believed them. It was a sick joke for 20 years that he truly grieved and thought his son was gone sick. He says, I've grieved my son all these years, this son who I sent off at the age of 17 over 20 years ago, and now you're telling me he's alive, and he's not only got a wife, he's got kids? But the text says it doesn't, he's not convinced. What turns the corner is when he looks out the door of the tent and he sees the moving vans, this fleet of U-Hauls that Joseph has sent. And he notices that each of the drivers are not Hebrew. They're Egyptian. And he goes, man, it's a crazy looking wagon out there. It's not our wagon. I see the signage on it, 1995, Those aren't our drivers. And suddenly he becomes convinced. He is 130 years of age. And when it suddenly dawns on him, bam, this is real, he just goes, let's load up. Let's head to Egypt. And they pack up like they're the Beverly Hillbillies. And he said, let's go. Now, can you imagine Jacob loading this up? Wrap it in a blanket, throw that in the box, just carry that out, just get it. Let's go, come on, we're burning daylight. We got to get out of here. Do you get this? My son is alive. He's not only alive, he's the prime minister. I got to get down there and hug his neck. That's exactly what happens. They don't leave anybody behind. So, in the white spot between chapter 45 and 46, you hear the screeching of brakes. Because it says Israel set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Now, why would a guy whose heart is set on getting down to Egypt as quick as he can, we're burning daylight here, why would he pull over and stop? Let me show you this on the map. We have Beersheba. It's not very far from Hebron. And if you know this, I had the most wonderful gift sent to me this week by one of the people in our congregation. They texted me a beautiful map of Idaho, and on it is a big, huge red arrow that's pointing to Wilder. So they just wanted me to know, don't forget, Pastor Dave, where Wilder's at. This is Beersheba. Why does he pull over in just a short distance? Well, did I mention he's 130? Okay, forget that. This is really serious. It's a teaching moment for us. Because one of the things that we began to see here is found in verse 2. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night. So they pull over. They're going to spend the night there. And verse 1 tells us what they're doing there. He's going to offer sacrifice to God. And God spoke to Israel in the vision at night, and he said, Yaakov, Yaakov. And you know what he replies? Hanini. Do you remember this? Do you remember this? Don't make me have to go back and start over. Hanini. Here I am. I'm right here. I'm ready to go. I'm fully attentive. You're right in the center of my life. I'm right here. After all the rush, why does he stop? Here's why. Because he knows that his emotions have to be put in the proper place. You know what? No one would ever fault him for wanting to just beat a path and deadhead straight down to Egypt. No one would fight him over that. But I'm telling you, he knows himself. If you can imagine the emotional roller coaster he's been on, compounded by 20 years, this is incredible. He's going to go see a child that he hasn't seen for 20 years that he knows is now alive. We got to get there. So certainly he's hurrying, but he stops at this place. And he stops there because his grandfather and his father have both been to Beersheba previously, and they built altars there and they worshiped the Lord there. So he takes time to worship the Lord there. And he wanted to make sure that his emotions were in second place, not in first place. Now listen to me. By nature, we are very feeling controlled in how we make decisions. Listen to me on this. We'll make many of our decisions based on our emotions. God's call upon our life is to make our decisions based on choice, not on feeling. We live in a world that's saturated. Every commercial that you are exposed to is making an appeal to your feelings. It's this fallen nature. It's the me first deal. It's all about me. It's me, self-centeredness. This will make you look better, smell better, drive better. It's going to make you act better. It's going to make you look better. It's all about me. Let me illustrate about how easy we make feeling-controlled decisions. I'll just mention the name Costco. You go there to just pick up the 2 items. They're important. You need them. You get out to the car, and here's what you say. How did that happen? You got the receipt. You ever notice that every person that exits Costco, they're met by a speed reader? Have you noticed that? Out the door. You're out there and you're thinking, good night, how did this happen? What am I going to do with a 55-gallon drum of pickles? And where did this garlic dip come from? I don't even like garlic dip. And it's all feeling. Can you relate with this? You know people who've done this, don't you? That's why we always do the same thing, Christmas shopping. Shopping Christmas, let's just get an extra one. We may have a friend come. We may have someone show up. Maybe your mother-in-law will come. We'll get something extra. Same thing happened when I took my wife to just look at a car. This thing here, she should have never opened the door and sat in a seat. She looked in that little tiny mirror and saw 20 years had disappeared from her face. She felt 20 pounds lighter. She said, I got to have this car. All feeling controlled, right? It happens. I'm just saying to you that, you know what? We are very good at making these kinds of decisions, and emotions for many of the important decisions of our life needs to be put in the passenger seat while God is in the driver's seat. And that's a really important thing. And why do we need to pull over at the crossroads and seek him? Because we need his permission. This guy's 130 years old. But even though he wants to get down there as quickly as possible, he pulls over because he's got the wherewithal to say, God, you are the one at the center of my life, not my emotions. And I'm asking you, is this okay with you? Are you good with me going this direction? Listen, last week I shared with you, we just finished up 9 years of being here at Deer Flat. When Jerry and I were pursued about this, we were living our own life, and God interrupted it and started talking Deer Flat. Our response was we started laughing. Deer Flat, what is that? Some hick place, some unknown. We knew one thing. If God is in this, we better know in our knower that we know, because when the fun's done, the only thing that keeps us there is knowing in our knower that that's where God's will is for us. We need permission. We raise our kids like this. I want to know where you're going, who you're going with, and what time you're going to be back. And depending on what the answers are, it will depend on whether or not I say, you can go. Well, guess what? God raises his kids the same way, and we're still God's kids. True? Well, then you should start acting like that. Seek his permission on some of this stuff. I'm not talking about the small stuff. I'm talking about the major stuff. I'm telling you, we need to have those moments where we say to God, are you okay with this? Are you okay? Because I don't want to go by myself. So Jacob, verse 1 says he offers sacrifices. By the way, did you know it's sacrifices, not sacrifice? The Hebrew rendering there is that he specifically wants to spend time there. Many sacrifices made, not just one, not just two, not just three. I'm going to spend a significant time because I want to know in my knower that I know before I leave here that God is okay with this and that he's going with me. Why was that so important? I'll tell you why. Because in that very place where his grandfather and his father built altars, his grandfather and father went down to Egypt. Both of them went down without ever praying about it, and they got in big trouble. And he knows that. And I love this. Verse 3. I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt. I will go down to Egypt with you. Hey, not only am I okay with you going there, I'm going with you. This is going to be awesome. We're going to go together. I'll bless you there. And I will surely bring you back again, and Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. In other words, you're going to die there. You live the rest of your life down there. He's going to close your eyes. Can I tell you how many bad decisions I've made when they've been feeling driven, when they've been emotionally based decisions? Can I tell you how many good decisions I've made after I've spent the time seeking the Lord's face over it because I waited on God? Now listen, notice what God says. You can go, and I'm going to go with you. There's nothing neater than knowing that the Lord is with you. And listen to me. This is why this is so important. Listen to me. The times I've walked back into my office across my years of shepherding people, when it's been disastrous, it's been heartbreaking, it's been so hard or so difficult because of whatever was going on, and I close the door and I just say, oh God, just tell me one more time I'm right where you want me to be, because it doesn't feel like it right now. That's why this is so important. Listen, some of you may be in a marriage like that. Some of you may be in situations like that where you never took time to even seek God and see if he was okay with it. There's a reason for that, and that's because God's not at the center of your life. But the things I'm telling you today, you can take it to the bank. Do you know how much that meant to Jacob when God said, not only can you go, I'm going with you. Big decisions we have to make. This is so important. We also seek the Lord at these crossroads because he has a plan. And that's what he says here in verse 5 through 7, you know. They head off down there and get into the area of Goshen, and he's got all of his family. Look at this. It says here, Jacob left there. He took all of his children, their wives, and their carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport them. I'm telling you, they must have looked like a mess. They took all their livestock, their possessions that they acquired in Canaan. Jacob and all of his offspring went to Egypt. He took with him to Egypt his sons, his grandsons, his daughters, his granddaughters, the whole bunch. He's got them all. No one's left behind because God's got a plan. God's got a plan. And then verse 8. Notice this. These are the names of the sons of Israel. Have you never noticed that the Bible names are such difficult names? It's a preacher's worst nightmare to have a section of scripture that he's got to read through, and it's got these names that he can't pronounce, so you rush through them and it sounds like Hebrew. You just put a little hey in there. And that guy knows Hebrew. Yeah, right. It's just a bad Bible name, you know what I mean? But look at this. Look at the names of these boys. Hanak, Palu, Hezron, Carmi. Look at that. Zohar. You know, our nursery could use some of these kinds of names. It really could. We need some Hanaks, some Palus, some Hezrons, some Carmi. Zohar. Got this little toe-headed kid. Hey, my name is Zohar. You know what it means? Light. It means brilliance. Oh, we got to name our kid that. That's right. You got to. You know what? They left nobody behind. You may be here today and think, you know what? I just feel like I've been left behind. Not with God, you haven't. If you feel like, you're insignificant, I'm telling you today, not with God. God never overlooked any of this bunch. One of the things I'm reminded of when I look at this is that I don't know who these people were. I hardly know anything about them, but God knows everything about them. He knows everything. And God has a plan, and he knows the plan. And the decisions that we're making that are going to impact our kids and our grandkids, don't take that lightly. Judah, he's got his group of boys, and you can read about him. His name's listed right here. And among Judah, the sons and Onan. And Onan, it says in parentheses, and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. God smote two of his boys. He lost two of his boys. But you know what? In his genealogy, he's got two other boys that are in the genealogy of none other than Jesus himself. God has plans. God has plans. I ask you this morning, are you going to live a self-centered, me-centered life? Or are you going to let God be the center? Because that's the question today. Now, God-centered living not only involves, seeking God at the crossroads, but it also involves stopping our desire to get too comfortable with this world. Take a look at verse 28 of chapter 46. Hurry up, we got to go eat lunch. Chapter 46, verse 20. Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. When they arrived in the region of Goshen, Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father, and they wept for a long time. Wow. Israel said to Joseph, Now I'm ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive. This is powerful. This is huge. Let's fast forward in the story. Jacob and his family arrive in Egypt. They're part of this incredibly grand reunion, and my goodness, it must have been a moment, I'm telling you. Did you hear that they wept for how long? A long time. They wept. They got their money's worth out of weeping. They made up for 20 years. They wept a long time. And here's this young teenager that Jacob last saw, who's now this strapping, young, good-looking guy with a wife and two kids, dressed in that Egyptian regalia and pulling up in that Mercedes-Benz chariot, Rolls-Royce, And Joseph bails out and he grabs a hold of his dad, and they just weep and they weep and they weep. And then they weep some more and some more and some more. And when they're all done weeping, Joseph says, "Oh, Dad, I got to tell you what happened. I was faithful to the things you taught me. I did what was right even when it was so hard. When that old has-been hussy, Potiphar's wife, came after me, I showed her the door. I showed her the door bad. I took the things that you taught me. I honored you. I honored God. I lived with integrity and character. I was in prison and God was with me. I stood before Pharaoh and told him that, oh, Dad, you'd have been so proud of me. I told Pharaoh his dream because God enabled me to do that. Dad, you'd be so proud of me. Look at these boys of mine. Look at these boys. They take after us. I didn't even give them Egyptian names. They're named Hebrew names. Dad, you'd be so proud. And man, Jacob, once again, he just falls apart. He erupts with tears. And he says, I can die. If nothing else happened after today, I can go to my eternity a contented and fulfilled man. I've seen it all. But isn't it in the times of prosperity that we really get tested the heaviest? Because Jacob's entire family has left Canaan. They don't live highfalutin lives. They live off the land every day trying to figure out what we're going to get, what we're going to eat. They moved to this place that's overflowing with grain, food, water. Famine is now behind them. They're not just shepherds, they're family members of the prime minister. Things are starting to really look good. I got friends in high places. Things are going to get comfortable for these Hebrew people. They're coming into this largest sophisticated city in the known world of that time. There's going to be all sorts of temptations and attractions and allurements. There's no shortage of multitude of different gods and idols that they could worship and pursuits that they could have. This is a different arena, and they are talking to each other, going, man, are we in for some good times? It's going to be good days ahead. Our worries are over. But in verse 31, Joseph gets very serious with his family. Take a look at it here. This is powerful. Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, I'm going to go up and I'm going to speak to Pharaoh, and we'll say to him, my brothers and my father's household who are living in the land of Canaan have come to me. The men are shepherds, and they tend livestock, and they have brought along flocks and herds and everything they own. Flocks, sheep and goats. Herds, cattle. They brought along everything. And Pharaoh calls you in, and when he does, and asks, what is your occupation? You should answer, your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did. Then you'll be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen, for all the shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians. So here's what he says. Now listen, guys, I've already talked to my boss. I already told him you guys are coming. I've told him about you, that you're a bunch of shepherds. So when you show up, because he's going to summon you, and when you get into that palace and you see that you're surrounded with this overwhelming, amazing, magnificent place, and he starts to question you and ask you, what do you do for a living? Don't tell him you work for Amazon. You smell like sheep. He's smart. He's going to know it. Don't be trying to schmooze him. Tell him you're shepherds and that you brought all the flock and all the herds. Be who you are. That's one of the most important messages he gives them. Do not forget who we are. Listen to me. If there's ever a time to be the people of God, not in a self-righteous way, but in a winsome way, our nation and our world needs it more than ever. People of hope. People of hope. People who have a God that's still alive and ruling and reigning on the throne of heaven. I'm telling you, do not forget who you are. That's what he said. I'm saying this to you. Don't be sheepish about your relationship and connection with God. Because the tendency is going to be to get comfortable. The tendency is going to be to fit into our culture and into our society. And that's why when you tell him, he's going to say to you, okay, I've given and set aside this whole land of Goshen for you. Why? It's a great area. It's really lush agriculturally. What are they? They're people who live off the land. They've got to have a place for their sheep. They've got to have a place for their livestock. You're going to be over there, and Joseph planned this thing out. He says, they're going to put you over there, and you're going to be by yourselves. We're not going to have anything to do with the rest of Egyptian society. It's a plan. We're not going to be around the temptation. We're not going to settle down in those foundations. We're not going to be a part of that world. And so they moved to Goshen. And they moved there reminded that Egypt isn't their home. How does that work for us today? I'm telling you, this place is not our home. Once we became citizens of the kingdom, this world was no longer our home, friends. So don't live like it is. Don't get so comfortable. Don't fit into the culture around you to the point that you don't even think. We need to be honest about who we are. Have people figured out who you really are? That you love God? That you love Jesus? Let's be honest about who we are. Not in a self-righteous way. Clothe yourself in humility. You know, if we're going to be followers of Jesus, and that's going to be an issue with the friends that we make, then we better pay attention to that. You know why? Because we're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to live for Jesus. We're not going to make any bones about that. We're going to stop and say, hey, could I pray for you? Could I help you with that? Could I tell you how God feels about that? What's on his heart towards you? Can I tell you that? What he's saying to his family is, listen, think twice. Think twice. You're shepherds. You're Hebrews. You're the people of God, not these Egyptians. You want to make a deal out of race? It's right here. Be people of God who love everybody, but are really wise in the level of interaction that we have. Do you hear this? Do you hear this? Do you think that I'm just telling you this to fill up some time? This is the word of the Lord for his people. This is the word of the Lord. Think twice. Because the moment that you start to make a profession, once they know that you are a follower of Christ, they're going to expect something different out of you. I can tell you that. You've heard me say, I do everything I can to try to lie my way out of being the preacher. Until they finally, are convinced that, I know what you do. I walked into a store the other day and two women confronted me. Hey, we know you. Who are you? I said, well, I was on a milk carton for years, You are the pastor at Deer Flat Church. I said, nope, First Baptist. No, you're not, Listen, when they find out that you're a lover of God, people start to act different around you. You know this. Give them all the reasons to not. We got to be more in love with Jesus than we are with the world. We got to be more dedicated to Jesus than we are to earn all the accolades of this world. Now Jacob goes before Pharaoh. And here he is, a man 130 years of age who's already had years of errors of his own ways. He's in a pagan land with a pagan king who has multiple gods, multiple idols, multiple wives. He could have easily said to him, listen, the God of heaven sent me here, and he has a long bony finger that he wants me to punch you in the breastbone and tell you, unless you change your ways, you're headed straight to hell. He could have easily told him that. But he doesn't. He treats this person honorably, lovingly. And if you read chapter 46 and 47, it simply says that Jacob blessed Pharaoh, and he blessed him twice. May God bless you, Pharaoh, and give you long life, and maybe he be good to you and care for you. May God unload his blessings on you, and I want to do the same. Bless you and thanking for you for loving my son. God-centered living involves seeking God when we're at the crossroads. It really involves us making sure that we're out of the picture. But it also means that we are compassionate and diligent in our treatment of people. And that's chapter 47 of how Joseph managed the remainder of the time of the years of famine. So I asked you this morning, do you think it matters to God whether or not you are God-centered in your life or me-centered? Because that's the question every one of us has to come to terms with before we walk out the door. And I think it's a great question. So let's close with a prayer this morning. Stand together. You guys have been great this morning. What if we were to really practice this day that we weren't going to be just hearers of the word, but we're going to be doers? Bow your heads. You're very, very smart people. You already know whether or not you're me-centered, whether or not you have God slotted in or put in specifically in the center of your life. You already know that. But I'm wondering if just for today, Lord, just for today, we put you at the center of our life. Just for today. And we intentionally became more attentive to what you think about what's going on than what we think. Just for today. And then in your grace and your mercy and your kindness, if you give us life tomorrow morning, then just for the day, you rule and reign in my life right at the very center. Get me in the passenger seat. And if I try throughout the day to reach over and grab the wheel, just slap my hand. Because, Lord, we want you. I want you. This group of such smart people, they know. I don't know if I'm going to live till Thursday, so I can't promise you I'm going to keep you the center till Thursday. I just know for today. May I die to myself this day and every day by the power of your Spirit. Kill me to myself. Drain me of my self-centeredness. Drain me. Help me to be more generous so I'll just kill that self-centeredness. Keep your hand upon my church family now as we leave this place. And may we live knowing in our knower that we know who we are in the midst of our world. We ask this in your name, Jesus. And we all said, do you love me? Just checking. Have a good rest of the day. God bless you as you go. Have a great afternoon.
and I'm holding on to faith. And 'cause I know you'll make a way, and I don't always understand, and I don't always get to see, but I will believe it, and I will believe it. And you make mountains move, you make giants fall, and you use songs of praise to shake prison walls, and I will speak to my fear.